Hello everyone, welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Himvar, and today I am going to talk about a story I wrote. So I don't talk a lot about my writing on my channel. Maybe the very rare occasional video. I'll mention it briefly, generally in my weekly update. But I have a story that has now come out in Half Human Heroes, edited by Jeremy Fee. And all the contributors, of course, are on BookTube in some capacity. And so I thought to to advertise in somewhat. It is pretty cheap, actually. I'll link it below, but you can get it digitally or physically. It's the first time I've actually had a story in print, so it's pretty exciting. But I wanted to tell you about my story and really where I got the idea. Maybe it'll be a little spoilery for the story, but it's a short story. I don't think it'll really spoil it for you anyways. So, but I wanted to start with a quote by Mark Twain that there is no such thing as a new idea. I like to wear my inspirations on my sleeve, so I'm going to tell you about them, and this goes along with the death of the author. I guess I am the living dead right now. So, anyways, my story is Amaranthine, Amphitheater. The title itself came just because of the alliteration. I just like the sound of it. That is the only reason it exists. I'd actually originally planned roughly in my outline for my other character, Arian, in his stories. I thought it'd probably be one of his stories, and then I realized it would work pretty well actually for Renata, who is the main character here. And yeah, so the structure of it, since it's immediately obvious that there's a kind of a plot gimmick going on, is well, it is basically in the story, right? It's counting down death essentially. So this is actually taken from two stories. I kind of combine the ideas. So it's The Curse of the Golden Skull by Robert E. Howard. It's a Cole story, Cole of Atlantis. It's really short and it's about a guy dying. That is basically the story. And then there's another story called The Sadness of the Executioner, which I think is a great title, by Fritz Leiber. I believe it's the opening Fafhrd and Grey Mouser story in Swords and Ice Magic, if I'm remembering correctly. That one is about death, trying to fill his quota, essentially, in 20 seconds, basically. So the story counts down 20 seconds, right? And I was like, I should do that too. Kind of as an homage to Leiber. And then when I had that idea for a while, and then when I read the Robert E. Howard story, I was like, hey, I can combine these. I'll make it shorter because 20 seconds is kind of a long time for the story I was had in mind, because I actually had the idea of the plot in mind. I just hadn't really gotten the motivation to write it. And then I was like, hey, when I can just do this with the plot, and then I can write a story. And it worked. I wrote it in one city. So the character itself, Renata, right? She is my mix of a sword and sorcery protagonist and a cyberpunk antagonist. She's inspired by a lot of people, and just the ones that are more obvious, I'm just going to mention real quick. She's inspired by Jorel of Joiry by C.L. Moore, who's a very important female sword and sorcery character. You should all read if you haven't. And then Alias of Westgate from Kate Novak and Jeff Grubb's Finder Stone trilogy. Not from the Chaos Queen Quintet stories by Christopher Husberg. Hanlin in some form, at least a little bit, from Sometime Lofty Towers by David C. Smith. Master Chief from Halo. Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell. Cassandra Kresnov is one of the bigger ones as well. But those are books by Joel Shepard. So obviously she's not all those things because none of those people are the same. And so I don't know, so she awakens in a tower, and that tower itself doesn't really get much in the story, but it features in the novella I've written about Renata, which is kind of her origin story. And it's actually the first story I started of hers, but this was the first one I finished of hers, Amaranthine Amphitheater. So, and also as far as her the influence goes, continued with the character, she has a white octagon on her neck. It's a religious symbol, actually, in real life. The white is for purity, kind of obvious reasons. That just what I did, I guess. And the octagon itself is an ancient symbol. I mean, I don't know if many people know this, but it's a Christian symbol. I'd say it's more than just Christian as well, because we see this actually probably the best piece of architecture we see the octagon in for religious reasons is the Dome of the Rock. We also see it in like the Basilica at San Vitale. So heaven is a circle and earth is a square, and the thing that joins the two is the shape of the octagon, right? Because it's between a square and it's between a circle. Anyway, so the tattoo itself is it's slated. It's like a clean slate, kind of like a tabula rasa type thing. It is a reference to Alias of Westgate and her azure bonds that are on her arms, right? And if you've read those books, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's also on her neck, which is exactly where like Kusanagi, for example, gets plugged in. So that is what is going on, right? Essentially. So the setting itself is one I created actually in late 2021 for an unpublished story. It's largely inspired by Impulture from the Forgotten Realms, but also Greyhawk, specifically the city of Greyhawk from the Greyhawk setting by Gary Gygax. Lankmar and Nessus as well. Lankmar from the Lankmar books, Far from Grey Mouser, Nessus from Book of the New Sun. And then generally speaking, more just diner stuff, like Vance and then Butler. You don't see a ton of it here. The city, I think I do mention it in the story, and that is Erntor, which is actually Old English for Eagle Tower, which is a reference to this towering metal structure that is built by the elders, which I can't remember if I mentioned in the story or not, that dominates the landscape, kind of based off the Modichin Tower. But it's the elders are spacefarers, right? This is science fantasy in a sense. But it's really where I put all my stories, not all of them, but most of them. So it's like I put my sword and sorcery stories here, which is mostly what I write, and like my cozy fantasy stuff. I think it all fits, right? I think this idea of narrative lets you do a lot of things in one world. Yeah, it's a fun place. Again, you only get like a tiny glimpse of it here. I don't think I have any other story actually published from that world. Though one should be published at any day. Another one called The Judgment of Thieves. So that'll be on Star Wars Shadows website. Anyways, so the Orns, which are mentioned here, they're kind of, this ties in with that science fantasy setting. Maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but like, I don't know. So anyways, they're kind of human with a question mark, if that makes sense. I try to throw in stuff like that because they're like, it's far future, you know what I mean? Like, and you can kind of get the full human experience, and I feel like that should be present in some sense. Like I have one story that has a lot of Eastern symbolism. Most of mine will have more Anglo-Saxon stuff. I just find that more interesting. I actually don't have any of that here, interestingly enough. And then, but like I have that not Elric with the albino woman. She's called a Ialawo, which is a Lukumi title, actually. And then we have Ash, which is Scandinavian, kind of me twisting the Ash of the first human, right, with Imbla, but just Ash in this case. So kind of associating her with the name when we don't think of Ash as a tree, right, but as ashes type of thing. Anyway, so, and then the old woman Mabel is not really inspired by anyone in particular, though the name itself is inspired by Tolkien's mother, J.R. Tolkien's mother. And then the big bad is like kind of my take on a D&D lich as well. It's also a being that's a lich, right? But really just a person uploaded to a computer. You know what I mean? Hence why they don't have humanity anymore, because you can't be a brain in the jar. Descartes. Anyways, then the angel symbol is one of like a fallen angel, more like, right? And then which references that they're all fallen in a sense in this place, right? Because they're not on Earth. They're on a different planet. You know what I mean? And in a way, they're prisoners there, right? It's an unwilling diaspora of sorts. You know what I mean? It's kind of colonialism mixed with Babylon, if that makes sense. You probably don't care because it doesn't really matter in the story, right? I'm just telling you the story. That's just the thoughts I have going in, and writing it. The villain itself I killed very quickly because I just like to. I don't really like drawing out my combat, as you can tell when there is fighting in the story. It's very swift. It's just how I generally do it. And it's kind of similar because I don't like I like reading swift combat when I read stuff. I just want it to happen bloody and fast and awesome, but I don't care for too many details. Like Drist and like Sanderson, for example, kind of bore me at this point. Um, and then the ending is something which it's obvious from the start, so it's not really a spoiler here, but she'll die. You know what I mean? Because I say that at the very beginning. It's like the first sentence. And so I probably had that in mind more so because of The Northman, the movie at the time. It's something I like in general, though. It's a trope I like. I really, not just letting characters die, but just killing them. Like, kill your characters. I think it's fun. Anyways, and it doesn't matter here, and that kind of becomes one of the themes is like this idea of sacrifice. And if what makes sacrifice, especially when you're Renata and you're immortal, right? That immortality is, I don't know. It's that one's more of my own thing, I think. I had originally designed her based off all those other composite like characters or artificial characters and other things, but the immortal thing, I remember I had a realization. I was like, I can make her immortal by giving her a bunch of different bodies. And I think I had that moment of like epiphany when I was like going to sleep one time. Anyways, there's a little bit more to talk about here, but probably not that you're interested in. So that's basically my inspirations, right? It's a lot of different stuff. Yeah, I'd like to be able to make more videos on this at some point. I mean, this is an exciting one because it's in print, so you can go and get this book. If I ever meet you, I guess I could sign the start of my little story. Yeah, anyways, I'm really excited. I hope anyone who reads it enjoys it. Let me know. If you don't like it, let me know, I guess, too. But I'm excited to have it out there again. And so thanks again to Jeremy Fee. And I'm excited to be in such good company. It is a good anthology. I actually really enjoy it. Like, I don't say that just because I'm in it. Like, I enjoy it. So anyways, this has been Leo Leams Lyceum. I will catch you next time.